there was a day in time where when our church started almost 25 years ago, we could explain what our church is trying to do on a napkin. In fact, we would train our volunteers. We would say, hey, here's the way we want you to think about the way we're trying to do church. It's this way. We use these models of a house. If you could show that foyer, living room, kitchen graphic. This was the way our model looked. We had a foyer, we had a living room, we had a kitchen. And that model is being disrupted. The way we would think about it, the way we would teach people to explain it to people, we would say, hey, this is what we're trying to do. People come into a Sunday environment. I want you to think about that like a foyer. What's the big deal about the foyer? Well, the foyer, you don't sit down and have a conversation in the foyer. The foyer, you're welcoming. The whole point of the foyer is to be acclimated, is to understand what's going on here, and then to understand what your next move is. And so from the foyer, you move into the living room. The living room is where you sit down on a couch, you have a conversation with people, you build friendship. And that's the way we designed our environments to work. Sunday morning was like a foyer, service teams, mid-size environments of 50 people, 70 people, 100 people where you could meet people. It was the living room. The kitchen, which was the way we designed our whole church to work, was essentially what we would call small group. And we would say, hey, the goal for everyone is to move into a small group. Why? Because life change happens best in the context of community. Because circles are just better than rows. Rows are great, but circles are just better. And now that whole model has been disrupted. The model has been disrupted, and it's left us trying to figure out, well, what do we do? We don't have to be driven by fear. We can see this as an opportunity, but we've got to ask the question, so what now? The model in the foyer has been disrupted because people don't attend church anymore as their first experience with your church, right? We're living in a screen-first culture. The digital world is the new foyer. You haven't been to a restaurant in years that you didn't look at the menu first online, right? You haven't booked a vacation that you didn't go do the 360 tour of the lobby of the hotel before you clicked reserve or book at the hotel. You haven't bought a car probably that you didn't actually get inside of and look around on a screen before you actually hit purchase. This screen-first digital age has changed everything, and it ought to change the way we're thinking about church. So here's what we're doing. I'm just going to give you a real practical application. I don't have a YouVersion story to tell you. I just have a 2019, here's what's happening right now story to tell you that I hope one day is going to inspire one of us in 15 years to be able to tell a story, our own YouVersion story. It's caused us really in 5 different ways to experience inevitable implications of what's happened. Instead of being driven by fear, I want to just give you 5 simple things. Here's what we're having to reevaluate, what we're having to relook at, implications of the disruption that we're experiencing. And it's an opportunistic look at it. Here's the first one right here. We must allocate resources, time, personnel, budget, to the new foyer. We've got to allocate resources to the new foyer. About 2 years ago, I met a gentleman named Frank Blake. Frank is just turned 70 years old. He's the former CEO of the Home Depot, one of the Atlanta companies that we're most proud of, obviously second to the Christian chicken, Chick-fil-A. Frank Blake is astonishing because he thinks in such a progressive way. He would say that his life, his marriage has been enriched because he attends one of our campuses. And I've had numerous conversations with Frank about this concept because about 2009, Frank they were about to roll into the massive economic crash that we experienced. And just before that, they had identified Amazon at Home Depot as their chief competitor, not Lowe's. And this is a company where people would walk around with blue shoes. Why? Because they had just kicked Lowe's well, I'll let you fill in the blank. He said, hey, listen, we decided Lowe's is not our chief competitor. Amazon's our chief competitor. And so we made some significant changes to invest in HomeDepot.com. What we experienced was the managers of our store, how would they feel about that? The same way as pastors of local churches are feeling, right? They're freaking out, going, no, this is terrible. How dare you? He said, we actually quit building physical stores. And we invested all of our money, all of our additional profit into HomeDepot.com. Our store managers were worried, they were scared, but what we started seeing was that it actually fueled growth in both places. That the more someone shopped online, the more they shopped in a brick and mortar store. The more someone shopped in a brick and mortar store, the more they shopped online, that the sales of both actually grew. Now, he's not making any implications to the church world, but I'm going, oh my goodness, this is so real. This is so important. So what I started doing is I went back to the drawing board at the beginning of 2018, and I said, okay, well, we got to figure out how to change our thinking. We've got to figure out how to think about this different. We can't think about this as digital is threatening what's happening in the building. We've got to see this as maybe God's given us both to fuel each other. Is face-to-face relationship important? Of course it is. John, the disciple that Jesus loved, Apostle John, he said in 2 John 1, verse 12, he said, right now I write to you with pen and ink, but I long to be with you face-to-face so that then our joy may be complete. Yeah, face-to-face is great. But he's saying, but right now I got the pen and the ink, so that's what I'm going to use. So yes, maybe God's given us both of these opportunities, the face-to-face and this digital opportunity to be able to connect with people in ways that we never could before. And so I said, we got to start changing our language. And so I drew up this document where I had, here are our big moves for 2018. I had 3 or 4 of them. I laid them out. I had a chart. I had somebody design it. I gave it to everybody on our staff. I had them laminate it. That's right, laminate it. And I had them put it up in their office. I said, I want this posted everywhere. Went to breakfast with Frank about a month later. I said, I was so proud. I thought I was doing so great. I said, Frank, look at what I've done. I handed it to him. He said, this is great. He said, did anybody howl when you did this? I said, I'm sorry, what? I said, Frank, use a word that a 70-year-old wouldn't use, you know? He said, did anybody freak out? Did anybody get bothered by this? Did anybody scream about this? I said, no, they were all pretty excited. And he looks at me and he goes, well, then you haven't done anything yet. And I was like, well, forget you, Frank. You know what I'm saying? Like, nobody asked you anyway, so what's up now? No, I didn't say that. The guy's like way more brilliant, you know, and way richer. And so I'm just like, yeah, okay, wow, that's really important. So I went back to the drawing board and I thought, wow, maybe he's right. Maybe until we actually put our best people on it, until we put budget on it. I remember thinking, after that conversation with him, I remember thinking, how many people on our team are waking up every morning thinking about this? And my answer at the time was, I don't know that it's anyone's full-time job to think about this. And so since then, we've shifted people, we've shifted resources, we've shifted time and attention, not to take our focus off of what happens in face-to-face, but to, in addition to, it's got to be additive. We've got to figure out how to create resources, mobilize more people. He said this was one of those mind-blowing moments for me with him as well. He said, maybe this is an opportunity to unleash people's giving to something that they might even not be able to see. He said the only time you ever really raise money is for a building. Maybe you raise money, a capital project, a capital plan, a capital opportunity for people to give to something that they might not be able to physically see. I thought, maybe it is. Maybe this is an opportunity. Here's what I know is I don't want anybody else to feel more opportunistic than we feel. Because again, the grave is empty, right?